The mystery that surrounds us when we speak of coins and notes does not reside in the iron vaults of a central bank, but in the damp and forgotten caves of our own soul. What you carry in your wallet is much more than a medium of exchange. It is a talisman charged with the projections of your gods and your deepest demons. Before we proceed into this descent into the abyss of the economic psyche, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and leave your mark of presence through a like. For what we are about to unveil hurts the flesh of those who feel imprisoned by the shackle of scarcity or the chain of endless greed. If you feel that no matter how hard you try, gold always slips through your fingers like fine sand, or if the possession of capital brings you an anguish that consumption cannot erase, know that you are not fighting against the market, but against invisible forces that inhabit your collective unconscious. Comment below what your greatest fear is when it comes to lack, and let this confession be the first step toward your financial individuation. We must begin by understanding that money is the modern mirror of the soul, a surface so polished and cold that it reflects not our face, but our darkest hungers and our most silent shames. Money, in its rawest essence, functions as an alchemical symbol that transmutes desire into reality. But at the same time, it becomes the perfect vessel for the projection of our shadow. When we look at the history of humanity, we see that gold has always been associated with the sun, with divinity, and with immortality, creating an archetype of power that blinds the ego and pulls it away from the totality of the self. For Carl Jung, the unconscious does not recognize the fiduciary value of a $100 bill, but it recognizes the weight of the power that this symbol exerts over the libido, which is our vital psychic energy. When we accumulate obsessively, we are not saving resources for the future, but trying, in a desperate and futile way, to fill an existential void that no amount of 30 or 40 million coins could ever satiate. This accumulation becomes a neurosis, an attempt to build a wall of gold against the inevitable advance of death and human finitude. We are often possessed by the object we believe we possess, becoming slaves to a metallic god that demands our time, our health, and our capacity to dream in exchange for a false sense of security that crumbles at the first sign of a market crash. Scarcity, on the other hand, often manifests as an ancestral wound, a complex that was fed by mother's milk and by the voices of fathers who echoed the fear of hunger and annihilation. Hundreds of years of deprivation history are engraved in the cells of our collective unconscious, and many of us operate under the myth of the eternal beggar, the one who believes that the banquet of life does not belong to him by birthright. This financial inferiority complex acts as a silent jailer, sabotaging opportunities for growth and making the individual feel like an imposter. Whenever success knocks at their door, it is a form of psychic self-punishment where the soul refuses to shine for fear of being punished by a severe divinity that demands the sacrifice of comfort in exchange for a false holiness. This poverty is not a lack of coins, but a constriction of the spirit, a belief that the universe is a zero-sum game where one's gain is necessarily another's loss. A thought rooted in the darkest primordial fears of our species. We must look at the myth of Midas, the king who turned everything he touched into gold, as a warning about the inflation of the ego that money can cause. When the archetype of the provider becomes unbalanced and turns into the archetype of the tyrant, the individual's emotional life dries up and becomes rigid like precious metal. He has everything, but he cannot eat, he cannot love, and he cannot feel the warmth of another human being. The curse of Midas is the loneliness of the top, where capital becomes an end in itself, and the subject loses connection with the soul of the world, becoming a gear in a machine of accumulation that serves no purpose other than its own expansion. Thousands of men and women live today under this influence, believing they are the masters of their fortunes, when in truth they are mere servants of a power complex that consumes them from the inside out. They walk through marble halls with hearts of lead, unable to realize that the gold they worship has become the very bars of their own psychic prison. The relationship with money is also a mirror of our family complexes, where the father and the mother become the figures who authorize or forbid prosperity. If your father was a man who saw money as something dirty or evil, it is likely that you feel an unconscious guilt every time your bank account reaches a positive balance of $10,000 or $20,000, leading you to spend it all irrationally to return to the state of purity that poverty represents. This cycle of self-sabotage is a ritual of loyalty to the clan, a way of saying that you still belong to that lineage of suffering, and that you will not dare to be greater than those who came before you. Breaking with this cursed inheritance requires a direct confrontation with the ghosts of the ancestors, and the understanding that your wealth is not a betrayal, but an evolution of the energy of your lineage. One must become the alchemist of one's own history, taking the leaden weights of family trauma and melting them in the furnace of consciousness until they are transformed into the gold of individual freedom. Debt, in turn, must be viewed as a modern form of demonic possession, where the individual hands over their time and their freedom in exchange for an illusion of immediate satisfaction. The debtor is, in symbolic terms, selling their soul in installments of 12 or 24 months, allowing the financial institution to take the place of their spiritual master. This compulsion for consumption is nothing more than a search for fragments of the soul that were lost in the gray everyday life of existence, where each new purchase promises, falsely, to bring back the meaning and color of life. It is the archetype of the poor eternus, the eternal child who wants everything now and cannot stand the tension of waiting or the effort of construction, preferring to live in a fantasy of abundance financed by their own future. This hunger is never satisfied because it is not a hunger for things, but a hunger for being, a desperate cry of a psyche that feels empty and tries to muffle that void with the noise of new acquisitions. In the depths of the financial market dwells the archetype of the trickster, the deceiver who manifests in volatility, bubbles, and sudden crashes that destroy fortunes in a matter of 60 seconds. The investor who ignores their own shadow is the favorite prey of this archetypal force, as they believe they can predict chaos with mathematical formulas, forgetting that the market is a living organism moved by the fear and greed of millions of unconsciouses in collision. When the bubble bursts, it is not just capital that disappears, but the identity of those who had deposited all their self-worth into the numbers on a screen, revealing the fragility of an ego that has no roots in the firm ground of the spirit. The depression that follows a great financial loss is often a descent into the underworld, a necessary encounter with the god Pluto, so that the individual learns that what is essential cannot be confiscated. In this dark night of the soul, the person is forced to ask who they are when the gold is gone, a question that most spend their entire lives trying to avoid through the distraction of profit. True financial alchemy begins when we stop seeing money as an external object and start integrating it as a tool of our own individuation. This means recognizing that poverty is not a virtue and wealth is not a sin, but that both are conditions of the journey that test our integrity and our ability to remain conscious amidst the temptations of the material world. We must learn to honor gold without worshiping it, using every cent as a seed of consciousness that can flourish into works that benefit not only our ego, but the collective unconscious of humanity. It is necessary to transform the lead of envy and fear into the light of generosity and prudence, finding the point of equilibrium between the earth's need for security and the sky's freedom. The gold of the wise is not found in the pockets of the greedy, but in the hands of those who have learned to flow with the energy of life, knowing that true value is an internal state that is merely reflected in the external world. Money is the blood of modern society, and as such, it must flow so that the body does not fall ill. When the blood stagnates in a single point, a thrombosis of the soul occurs, and when it leaks uncontrollably, a hemorrhage of the spirit occurs. We need a new economy of the soul, where the value of a human being is not measured by what they possess in their iron vaults, but by their capacity to move between the world of archetypes and the world of concrete reality with wisdom and temperance. There is no magical solution to financial problems that ignores the structure of the psyche. For as long as you do not make your unconscious conscious, it will direct your economic life and you will call it fate or bad luck. The journey to freedom begins the moment you face your shadow in the bank statement and decide that you will no longer be a puppet of the wounds of the past. We are called to be conscious participants in the great circulation of value, understanding that every transaction is an opportunity to practice mindfulness and to align our material existence with our spiritual purpose. As we conclude this reflection, I ask that you do not take these words merely as theory, but as an echo that must resonate in your next choices. For every decision to buy or to save is a liturgical act that defines your place in the cosmos. If this content touched a wound or brought an unexpected light to your darkness, share it with someone who is also lost in the labyrinth of the modern economy. For the healing of one is often the beginning of the healing of many. May the search for external gold never prevent you from finding the internal gold. The philosopher's stone, which is the only wealth that crosses the veil of eternity. Leave your final comment saying how you intend to change your relationship with your financial shadow from today onwards, and stay firm on the path of your own truth. For the universe does not deny abundance to those who have the courage to be who they truly are in their totality. Your wealth is the measure of your integration, and your peace is the highest dividend that the soul can pay to the ego that has finally learned to serve the self.